Hello everyone. Following the online lectures, I've recorded around the first topic of the strength and conditioning module, so the movement assessment. I will briefly show you what is the main workflow to analyze a movement task. So I'm gonna run the video, which is actually a video showing lateral shuffles or side steps, something that is commonly performed into, let's say, athletic context at the different competitive levels. So if I rerun the task, the first step, the first thing that we should consider is the number of key phases that this specific task should be broken down into. And by looking at the task, so usually what we do, we break down the task into three main phases. So the first one, this one is the, let's say, the starting position, where actually the performer assumes a sort of the so-called power position. So she squats down. In this case, there is let's say an overall contribution of both the anterior and the posterior kinetic chains. Should be a relatively symmetric contribution of the anatomic chains running on the left and right side of the body, and obviously of the deep chains as well, in order to maintain and to keep control across the trunk and the pelvis. Then we have the second stage, or the second phase, when actually the body is demanded to produce force with the no leading leg. So the body is trying to push against the ground in one direction in order to be moved toward the contralateral direction. So in this case, we have one limb generating forces through the lower limbs muscles, and try to drive the whole body in the opposite direction. So this is the second phase, the second stage of the movement. And finally, before changing direction, so we have a decelerating phase followed by a breakdown movement. So the body, after accelerating from the previous phase, is demanded now to decelerate. So is demanded to absorb forces rather than producing forces as it did during the previous phase, and as to control these force absorptions by completing both, by achieving both a static and a dynamic stability. So you can easily appreciate how a complex task is has actually embedded in itself many phases with many or different goals depending on the specific phase and task to be performed, and obviously the contribution, the relative contribution and differential contribution of the anatomic chains that I've introduced earlier in the online lecture will change accordingly and massively. So what I've done, I've created an edited version of this task with a specific analysis, and now I'm gonna run this file just to show you how it looks. So again, the same task, but you will see some highlights for each one of the specific phases. So the phase one is the starting position, where at the top level the main aim is stability. So we want the body to be stabilized around the trunk and around the pelvis, and obviously the most common anatomic chains involved in postural goals or postular aims, we try to provide their contribution in order to achieve this. So let's have a look at the specific anatomic change. So probably if you look as we are now watching the video, we are in a front position, so we are analyzing the stabilization of the body from the front, so in the frontal plane, and probably we can easily identify that the two lateral chains are counteracting each other, are contributing together to keep a stabilized position of the trunk, as it is highlighted by the two lines running across the shoulders and across the pelvis. So we want to avoid as much as possible exaggerated or non-functional side flexion of the trunk, because this could have, let's say, detrimental effects on the lower limb mechanics, with potential harmful consequences on the hip, knee, and ankle joint. Now, if we would have a chance to look at the performer, this guy, in this case, this girl from the side, we should probably mention that the effectiveness of this static balance situation is also significantly supported by both the front and the back superficial lines. We know that these lines stabilize the body in the sagittal plane, so acting as agonist-antagonist anatomic trains. Being the stability the main objective of the first phase of this side steps task, so we can look at the specific characteristics. We can look at the base of support, and in this case we have double leg. Obviously, freezing the video at this frame, there is a right leg dominance, so most of the load is shifted toward or is put on the right leg. Again, with a parallel double leg base of support and wide. The balance is mostly static in this specific moment, and we can easily identify the good alignment of the lower limbs. So we have an ideal line running across the three main joints of the lower limb, and finally across the trunk, the pelvis, and the trunk. Let's move on to the next stage or the next phase. So the next phase is that finalized to accelerating. So actually the mobility is replacing the stability aim. Again, we have a bunch of anatomic trains collaborating each other and contributing to facilitate force production in this case rather than force absorption, and drive the body toward the other direction. Again, the anatomic lines now are serving as producers of forces. The front line, so the one placed on the front of the lower limb, keep the squat position and facilitates obviously the force production by the extensors of the knee and the extensors of the hip. And the front line, the upper one, is keeping again a stabilized control over the pelvis. In terms of force production, so this is mainly done by the right leg. So the right leg is pushing right in order to move the body left according to the third law of motion, action, reaction. In this case, we don't have a very powerful action, so the rate of force development is not so high, and obviously the acceleration gained through this action is not very extensive, very great. For the force transfer, we have very good and appropriate force transfer. So it starts from the lower limb and goes through the lower limb itself, and finally it moves the pelvis and the center of mass, which is let's say roughly placed in this position. In terms of orientation, so if we consider the force vector, we have a dominance of horizontal forces because the main aim is to move the body sideways, and we have another component which is the vertical one, just finalized to, let's say, to counteract the effect of the force of gravity. Moving forward to the next and last phase, we have the change of direction. So actually the performer again comes into a stability related phase, where the same anatomic lines that originally had a role in stabilization and then were demanded to produce forces to accelerate and move the body sideways, now again the same anatomic lines, the lateral lines, are demanded to absorb forces and to keep a good stabilization of the body in both the frontal and in the horizontal plane. So that's why the spiral line is acting here, preventing an over-rotation of the shoulders across the trunk, and as a consequence a rotation of the hips and probably a let's say non-functional patterns and movements of the lower limbs. Again, since being the stability the main aim, so we have a base of support that begins in a single leg one, and then for the break of the movement becomes a two-leg one, where the driving leg, so the leg that was driving the movement in the previous phase, is the one absorbing most of the load. The balance is featured by dynamic characteristics, and then it becomes a static balance. In terms of alignment, again, we should look at ideal lines, or let's say theoretical lines, starting from the top of the feet and running across the lower limbs, joints, and the trunk itself. So this is a kind of analysis of one of the most common athletic tasks. What I want to show you is how you can, let's say, use an Excel spreadsheet for creating a specific report of this movement, or in general, whatever motor task you want to analyze. So I created a template which is let's say adjustable for whatever task you want to analyze. You can see that the template is let's say characterized by two main parts. The first one to the left, or the mid one, where you can let's say select, and shortly I will show you how to use it by using a drop-down menus, the specific characteristics you want to pick up. And in the right side you have place, you have room for attaching images, probably the same images I've recently showed you during the movement analysis, just to highlight the key main phases of the movement task to be analyzed. And finally, you can add also additional notes, let's say as complementary notes in addition to the main analysis. So all these sections works as let's say drop-down menus, so you can selectively pick up either postural analysis or movement analysis. Let's assume that our main aim is to analyze again the shuffle, the lateral shuffling, so the side steps we just watched in the video, and we want to analyze let's say the movement from the front, because this is the only video available for the analysis. Here we should select the specific anatomic chains contributing to each one of the given phases we have identified in the breakdown of the movement. So let's say that for the first phase we considered the let's say the superficial or the superficial back chain, or the lateral lines for stabilizing the body in the frontal plane. Again, the main aim was stability, so we can keep stability, and here we can select what actually is relevant for stability. So the first characteristic was the base of support, and then we can again pick up some specific details for the base of support. So in the power position, the first phase of the fascia of the shuffling, we add a double leg base of support, and then we can type whatever you want just to add some notes. So now I want to show you, actually I've done this work for you, and you will practically complete this task in the computer room in the next meeting we have, in the next class. So I will show you how the same template has been completed for to analyze the entire task. So what I've done, I have attached the three pictures of the key phases of the shuffling on the right in support of what I've selected for the analysis. And as you can see, for each specific phase I've defined what was the main aim, what point of or what perspective was used to analyze the movement, the specific anatomic trains involved or mostly involved in pursuing these aims, what was the main pillar, stability or mobility, and the specific characteristics for each one of them, with the detailed analysis, so subjective professional analysis accompanying the details. Finally, the same report can be printed out as PDF file, and obviously you can eventually provide your customers, your athletes, with a documented report of your professional services at the beginning, and eventually as a follow-up at the end of your let's say professional consultancy. So these technical and practical professional skills will be practiced much more during the computer class session, where you will be using a software enabling you to analyze a video, or actually to analyze a movement in a video, to break it down to main phases, to edit the video itself with some text on drawing lines and adding some callouts, and then you will probably use the same template to complete a comprehensive analysis of one or many of the most common athletic tasks. So again, thank you for your attention, and I will see you soon.